Welcome to another installment of Turn Up the AC Hot Takes with Reason on a solo edition. Now this is truly a sad time in the sport of boxing. The biggest fight that can be made that is not a heavyweight fight between two undefeated world champions, Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford, is not happening next. And at this point, I have no clue if it'll ever happen. As you can see on the screen, ESPN's Mike Coppinger reported that instead of fighting Spence next, like we all wanted to see, Crawford will instead be fighting David Avanesian, who holds a record of 29-3-1 with 17 KOs, on December 10th in his hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, at Chi Health Center on BLK Prime on pay-per-view for $39.95. This will be a career-high payday for Terence Crawford, reportedly at $10 million. Now, before we go on about this fight not happening, I gotta tell you, I'm a fan of both fighters. Both Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, I've followed both their careers pretty much since I first heard of them, and I've been looking forward to this fight happening for a long time at this point. But we gotta keep it a buck and call it how we see it, because that's what we do here on this channel, regardless of any hate that may bring our way. Because around here, we keep it real, and some of y'all don't even keep it realistic. I say that to say this. If Errol Spence Jr. was the one who opted out and abandoned negotiations with Crawford to fight David Avanesian, old media, boxing podcasts, YouTube channels, they'd all be calling him every name in the book, accusing him of ducking. Let's not lie to ourselves here. And it seems to be a popular trend by old media, boxing podcasts, and the average fan to hate on pretty much anything PBC, Showtime, Fox, and Al Heyman are doing in the sport of boxing. But at the same time, they allow other promoters to constantly lie in interviews about trying to make certain fights happen. And those fights always seem to fall through for whatever reason. Example, Wilder vs. Joshua, when they were both undefeated. And everybody wanted to see that fight. That was the biggest fight to be made at that time. Eddie Hearn always claimed it was on Wilder or whatever. Regardless of who's at fault, that fight hasn't happened still to this point. And both fighters have lost multiple times already at this point. Let Golden Boy tell it. In 2021, Ryan Garcia was supposed to fight Manny Pacquiao, Tank Davis, Javier Fortuna, Jojo Diaz, and Devin Haney. And none of those fights happened. The only fight he had in 2021 was against Luke Campbell. You know what I mean? De La Hoya is even currently talking about how he would like to make Virgil Ortiz versus Boots Ennis next. But we know that won't happen. Ennis is scheduled to fight, I believe, December 17th. So we'll see who he ends up fighting. But that's a different topic for a different day. A lot of people out there really need to get out their feelings and their emotions when it comes to things like this in the boxing world. I've seen many people somehow still trying to blame Spence and PBC for this fight not happening, and really not holding Crawford accountable at all. When a report came out through Boxing Scene earlier in the day, before the announcement of Crawford fighting Avanesian, that Spence's side had growing concerns that Team Crawford wasn't committed to the fight, stating that Crawford's side had gone silent for 2 weeks following 3 changes to the contract that Crawford's attorney requested. So now this is where we are, and this fight is looking like it may not ever happen. Spence is on record saying that he doesn't have very long left at 147, and the fight with Crawford was most likely going to be his last fight at this weight. So we'll see. Does he move up now to 154? We'll see. Only time will tell. I'm not very optimistic about this fight happening ever anymore, because we've seen this before with Floyd and Manny Pacquiao. That fight happened 6 years too late. And regardless of who you think was at fault, in my opinion, we were robbed of potentially the greatest fight of all time. I truly believe that fight had the potential to be the greatest fight of all time, because both fighters were in their absolute primes and were clearly head and shoulders above the rest of their competition. I know we got the fight in 2015, but at that point, it really wasn't the same fight that it could have been, when they were just over 30. Instead, we got it when they were in their mid to late 30s. I mean, this fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence could end up being the same thing, or even worse, we may never get it. Because Terence Crawford is currently 35 and Errol Spence is 32. And as they say, boxing is a young man's game. So who knows if this fight will ever happen. Unfortunately, I hate saying that, because this is definitely a fight that I wanted to see, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm a fan of both fighters, and it would have been nice to see who really is the top dog at welterweight, because both guys are clearly head and shoulders above the rest of the competition. Both are undefeated, both in their primes, and it always seems to happen like this in boxing. And I don't care who you think is at fault. I really don't, because at the end of the day, we all lose. If you're a boxing fan, we all lose, because we're not getting the fight and fights that we want to see most of the time. Too many people want to protect that O and are scared to put it on the line, which is why I always say fighters like Devin Haney need to be praised. Fighters like Jermell Charlo need to be praised, because they're not scared to put it on the line and go out there and fight anybody. They're with all the smoke. Terence Crawford versus David Avanesian is not a fight that anybody's asking for. Yes, Bud's making a career-high payday. But let's be honest, this fight is going to flop horribly. I'll be shocked if they ever release the numbers for this fight. I, for one, am not purchasing this fight. We know who's going to win. It's going to be a stoppage. It's just a matter of when. I don't see this fight going more than like 4 or 5 rounds, to be honest. And as a point of me recording this audio, Crawford has yet to post anything on his Instagram about the fight. So other than the initial announcement, there's really been no promotion to this point for the fight. And it's about 6-7 weeks from now. So I don't know how he thinks this fight is going to do any type of numbers if there's no promotion from him. This goes back to even to years ago, or recently, in recent memory, where Top Rank's Bob Arum has always said Crawford does not promote his fights, and his fights flop. Bob Arum also mentioned that he's lost millions, so much money that he could build a mansion in Beverly Hills with the money he lost for Crawford fights. I really don't know what to say more about that. I mean, let's keep it a buck and call it what this is. And this looks like a duck on Crawford's part. And if you don't think so, at the very least, you must admit that he needed a tune-up before facing Errol Spence Jr. I think those who are in an uproar about Crawford fighting Avanesian instead of Spence would at least respect it from him if he was honest and said, and admitted that he needs a tune-up before fighting Errol Spence. Crawford hasn't fought since stopping Sean Porter in November of 2021. Errol Spence stopped Ugas and captured the WBA strap earlier this year in April, after a 16-month layoff due to having surgery on a detached retina in mid-2021. And Spence did not come back for a tune-up. Even after his car crash, he did not come back for a tune-up. Again, he went right in there to fighting Danny Garcia, top contender at welterweight at the time. And Spence said it before, you only need tune-ups if you're unsure of yourself. And clearly Crawford needs a tune-up because he's fighting David Avanesian next and not Errol Spence. Spence said it himself in a tweet from March 17th of 2021, back when he was in pursuit of the WBA strap that he eventually got from Ugas. That tweet read, "We'll see who's holding up what when I get this third belt." Crawford already has a new fight scheduled, while Spence is still searching for a new opponent now. David Avanesian has 3 L's on his record and was stopped by Mean Machine, a fighter who was stopped by Terence Crawford in December of 2019. And he was also beaten by Lamont Peterson by unanimous decision. Peterson was stopped by Errol Spence Jr. back in January of 2018, a year after Peterson defeated David Avanesian. Avanesian's third L came in his second pro fight back in July of 2009. Yes, I know Avanesian has a W over Sugar Shane Mosley, but by then it was Mosley's last fight of his career, and he was 44 years old at the time. And let's be honest, do any of you believe Shane Mosley would lose to David Avanesian if he was anywhere near his prime? Because I don't. I really don't see that at all. It's very unfortunate that Spence and Crawford is not happening next. It's very unfortunate we will not have an undisputed champion in the welterweight division in the 4-belt era. We'll never know at this point. I don't think we'll ever know who is truly the top dog at welterweight. Errol Spence, Terence Crawford. We can argue about it till we're blue in the face. But as I mentioned, we all lose as boxing fans because we're not getting this fight. There's really no clear direction that Errol Spence Jr. is going to go at this point. Rumors are that Boots, Ennis, and Stanionis are petitioning to fight Errol Spence next in a mandatory setting. So maybe probably going to be one of those two guys if Spence stays at 147, and if not, he's probably going to move up to 154. And there's a ton of fights up there at 154 for Errol Spence Jr. So he's not lacking for opponents. After Crawford beats David Avanesian, who's next for him? If it's not Errol Spence Jr., let's keep it real. Who's next? What's he gonna do? Fight? What? He ain't gonna fight Boots. I don't see that happening. Maybe Virgil Ortiz. But I really don't think Golden Boy wants to put Ortiz in there with Crawford because, let's keep it real, I think Crawford beats Ortiz. And I'm sure a lot of you agree with that. Does he move up to 154? What does that do for him? Because why at this point, if he's not going to fight Errol Spence Jr., why would PBC want to make any new fights with Crawford up at 154? Because pretty much all the top guys at 154 are aligned with PBC. So why, if he abandoned talks, with Spence, while Spence's team was waiting for a response from Crawford, he abandoned the talks, and out of nowhere he has a new fight. Why would they want to make something happen with him there? Against one of their guys at 154. So he might have to stay at welterweight, and he ain't gonna fight Keith Thurman because that's another PBC fighter. If anything, if Spence moves up and vacates, I could see Thurman fighting Boots at that point because it's for a belt. So there's Crawford's gonna be right back in the same boat that he was, with a lot of question marks over who's next if it's not Errol Spence Jr. Yeah, man, I really wanted to see this fight. It would have probably been fight of the year. It would have been a great back and forth between two world-class fighters. In my opinion, two of the top 3 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. I've had Crawford at number 1, and then Spence at number 3. In between them, I got Usyk. So it's unfortunate that this fight's not going down, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit and give my thoughts. I think it's a duck on Crawford's part. I'm gonna be honest. No other potential fights between Errol Spence and anybody took anywhere near this long to get made. And throughout negotiations, Crawford and his team were so vocal about this and that, and supposedly Crawford agreed to everything, agreed to all their concerns. If he agreed to all the stipulations and everything, then why isn't there any fight? So clearly he did not agree to everything. If he was still asking questions about finances, you can't agree to everything if you're still asking questions and there's no fight. So until next time, this has been Reason. Turn up the AC hot takes. Go ahead and let me know in the comments section who's at fault. Is it Errol Spence Jr.? Is it Terence Crawford? Do you not care? Are you just mad because it's not happening? Voice your concerns, please. We gotta start holding these fighters accountable for not making the fights that we want to see. And it's that time that as fans, as media, we gotta talk about it. We gotta call these fighters out because it's happening far too often that we're not getting the fights that we want. So go ahead and comment, hate, debate in the comment section, whatever you want to do. We appreciate it all. This has been Reason. Turn up the AC hot takes, and we're out.